Okay, for the next stage of what we're trying to do with our character, and getting our character with the weapon ready to go in Blender so that we can put our character in Unity. So if I take a look at what we've got, this is kind of where we left off in the last demo, and I've got a bone system all set up with inverse kinematics. I can grab the bone and kind of move it, and you can see how things will kind of work, and it looks really good. And you should test your rig as you start to do this. You should definitely kind of grab it and kind of see how it's going to work. Once you've got a good setup, you can select all, A key, pose, clear transform, all, and then what it'll do is it'll get rid of all the poses that you've done. Excuse me, I've got a really bad cold. So anyway, now what we need to do next is we need to apply all of our body objects to, well, actually we need to parent all of our body objects to the armature so that the armature is essentially in control of all the body objects. However, there's a couple of things that are really important about the next step, and this has happened, or I know these things because I've made some mistakes. You can just parent all the different objects. So if you take a look at the way the characters come in from Muse, the body is separate, and then you've got the eyes, and then you've got the gun, of course, is separate, and you've got the lamp, the shoes are separate, and the top is separate. And you theoretically could parent each one of these to the armature, and then it would, well, theoretically it would work. However, that's not true. What ends up happening is in places like the neck especially, you'll see how the mesh, if I go to wireframe mode here, you'll see how the mesh kind of goes up underneath. So the body portion, the neck portion of the character goes underneath the t-shirt. What ends up happening is when you apply the weighting, which you'll find out more about in a second, the weighting doesn't really work correctly, and so what we end up having is when you bend the shoulder, like pieces of the neck will come through the shirt and so on and so forth. So the only way to really make it work and work well is to actually do a boolean so that the excuse me, so that the character is all one part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the body and I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to turn everything else off. So now I basically just got his head and his hands. Those are part of the body. I'm going to go to my modifiers and I'm going to add a Boolean modifier, and I'm going to go to a union, which is the addition of whatever object I select, and the first one I'll select is my top. So now what should happen is you should see the top kind of show up. And one of the reasons why I turn off the objects that I want to add to the body when I do a union is because, let me X this, if I've got the tops turned on and then I go and do a Boolean, you really can't see if it's working because it looks the same. But if you turn the tops off, then you'll see the object appear like this. Just do it one more time. Boolean, union, tops. Now this is less important when you're doing unions, but when you start doing things like intersections and difference, and you've got the object turned on, it's actually really bad because then you can't see what you're doing. So it's just best to turn them off. So then what I'll do is I'm going to hit apply. And now you'll see that if I were to tab into edit mode, now my meshes have been added to the same object. We're going to continue doing this. So now I'm going to go back to a Boolean, and what's next? Let's do a union of the eyes. And hit apply. And then I'm going to just double check that they're there. Yep. And next is the shoes and the bottoms. Oh, I didn't do the bottoms. So then we'll do Boolean union of the bottoms, and I like to work my way down too. Sometimes Blender gets a little glitchy when it's doing booleans, especially booleans of objects that are this complicated, and so I find that if I did the shoes first, it like kind of freaks out sometimes because there's like nothing connecting it. So it's really good to kind of work your way down so that everything's kind of connected to each other. So now hit apply, and the last thing that we need is the shoes. So it's another boolean, another union, and we're going to add our shoes. And let's see, sometimes the shoes don't come in very well, by the way. Sometimes I've had one shoe come in and the other one not. When that happens, what I actually did is I went in edit mode with the shoe, deleted one, added a mirror modifier, got out of edit mode, applied the mirror modifier, and then did the boolean again, and it worked just fine. So sometimes it just does some strange things. So basically, if I take a look, now my character is all one object. This would be a good place to save your character and also save them as a mirror modifier applied, or not mirror modifier, the boolean modifier applied. So I might go File, Save As, and then I might save my gun, mirror applied, and I might say with character boolean. And then I know what this file is, and I've got a sense of where I'm going. And now I'll actually take this and I'm going to delete all of my unnecessary objects. Now, for those of you who have a more complicated character, say you've you've chopped off his arm and you've added a gun. In that case, you do not need to do a boolean to your character or to the gun. The gun does not need to be a part of the mesh for the character. It really is only solving problems when we have the meshes that are overlapping. So if I take and click on the body here and I tab in and I go to wireframe mode, you can see that there's places where there are meshes that are overlapping. Now the next thing that we should actually really do is try and take care of some of these oddballs. So there you can see there's like this really odd shape that's internal there. I'm not going to worry about these shapes here because they're important, believe it or not. But as far as that shape, not really important. I do believe, let's see if I remember correctly, there were also a couple down here, yeah, and the ankles, these strange objects that kind of got created. So what I can do is, in edit mode, I'm going to just kind of take care of these. So I'm going to go to vertices select mode, hit all, and then what I'll do is I'll go to a side view like this. I'm going to use the circle selector. Now if I do this, you know, realize I get vertices that are also on the surface. I just want to make sure I got everything. But then I'm going to get out of wireframe mode and I'm going to take my circle selector. Let's turn off the armature for a second. I'm going to take my circle selector and I'm going to middle click with the scroll key. I'm going to deselect any vertices that I selected when I was doing that, and then I can go back to wireframe, just double check that I've got that shape internally all set up, and I will delete it. And I can do the exact same thing down here in the feet where we have these really strange little shapes, and I know from having done this previously that these shapes actually don't end up getting chosen very well when we do the deformations with the armature, and so all sorts of problems happen. So then I'll go back into get out of wireframe mode and use the middle click button or the scroll wheel click and the circle selector to deselect any of the surface vertices that I selected, and then I'll go back into my wireframe mode and just check on what I'm doing, and yeah, all looks good. So X, delete my vertices, and now I have a pretty clean thing. I mean, yes, I've got some overlapping here. One of the reasons why I'm not going to take care of those is, number one, they should go just fine. And if they don't, I can get rid of them later. The other thing is we're going to use the exact same UV map textures that came to us from Muse, and what's kind of cool is they got packed into a single texture. So right now if I went to Shift C and I went to rendered mode, we can see that the character, even though now the character is one object, the textures all come together. So that's a nice thing about the way Muse works, is it kind of packages all the textures into one file. I think it's a PNG, one PNG file, and we can use it quite well. So now we're ready to do the magic. This is what's really cool. So this is the fun part. Really fun part. So, whoops, don't want to do that. So, right away, before you do anything else, you just want to kind of double check your positioning of everything, make sure everything looks good, turn on your armature, make sure that everything is pretty much the way you wanted to go, and then you have one real simple thing. I'm going to turn selection on for both the gun and the body. I'm going to select the body, and then I'm going to shift and right click on the armature. Whoops, let's go to object mode here. So I'm going to click on the body first, then I'm going to right click and select the armature. Then I'm going to hit Control P on the keyboard, which is my parenting. And I'm going to set parent to armature deform with automatic weights. When we do that, it may take a second. And what's going to happen is it's going to parent the body object, the mesh object, to the armature. And if you take a look at my outliner, you can see that the body object disappeared. And now it is actually underneath, or not underneath, but inside the outliner for the armature. And now it's really cool, so I can right click on my armature, and I can go to pose mode, and theoretically, I should be able just to grab my hand, and voila, it doesn't work. Now, something interesting happened there. It looks like the fingers weren't parented to the palm on that side. Yeah, it certainly looks like that. Whereas this one's working pretty good. You'll notice that we do have some problems here, and we're going to deal with that in a little bit. So anyway, but that's a good indicator that the mesh is being deformed correctly by the armature, and we're looking really good actually. I can also just hit R and X, rotate X, to kind of check on this, and this is what I like to do, RX, and then I'll grab the and then I'll just kind of try and see what I can do with different bones and just kind of make sure that everything is looking good. Looks like I also lost an inverse kinematic modifier here on this foot too. So some funky things happened when I transferred that over. Let's take care of a couple of those really quickly so that I can show you how this works. So this is called palm.r. So I'm going to take the, oh, see, that's funny. That's not even, well, okay, we're not going to, so we're just going to go to our bone constraint and, see, I can't, why can't I add a, oh, because I'm in pose mode. I need to be in edit mode. Ha ha ha. So I can go to edit mode, and now I can parent. I should be able to parent. Well, you know what? Maybe I have to. Let's undo. We're gonna go back and we're gonna undo. We're gonna clear our parent, because apparently something was wrong with my armature. So, and this is good. Sometimes you just got to go back, and I might not be able to go any further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and revert to my last save file. Yes. Okay. So now we have the body is all set up. We haven't deleted any of the other objects, but we're gonna leave it the way it is, and just get rid of all this stuff. Okay. So now I need to take a look at, I get out of pose mode, go to edit mode, and yeah, look at that. So now if I go in here and I type, oh, yep. So I guess you cannot, I learned something new here. I guess you can't do parenting after you've applied something with weights. Interesting. Okay, so got that, almost done here. And that's why, you know, I was saying you should test your inverse kinematics. I don't know what that's there for. That's kind of weird. Delete that bone. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there, but when I was kind of moving things around, I didn't notice that the fingers weren't moving with the palm. And, yeah, that's my fault. In fact, let's look here. Oh, it looks like the thumb. Let's get rid of this bone for a second. And let's get rid of the gun. Let me just make sure the thumb looks good. Oh, the thumb is not even set up correctly at all. What is going on? Did I not do that during the last demo? I guess maybe I did not. Alright, this will take 2 seconds to do. So anyway, apologize for this. Just put the... oh wait, I need both of these to move up and over, because I need a third one. Not quite sure how I missed this, but that's okay, it happens. Alright, so now I've got the thumb there. Extrude, one last thumb. And I'm not going to bother naming them like I should, because in the you know, for time's sake here, I don't want to. Okay, so now we got, yeah, that looks much better. Okay. Oops. Okay, there we go. Bring that down a little bit. Over. Alright, now we've got those where we want them. We're close enough that we're going to do this anyway. And now I need to parent that to the palm.r. Okay. So now we've got everything here. And now I need to create the bone for the gun again, because I had to delete that. So Shift A adds a new bone. And we're just going to make that nice and big. And 3. So I'm kind of redoing what I did in the previous demo here. But, like I said, sometimes it's not bad to have to redo things, because sometimes you just gotta... Okay. And remember, I'm putting the pivot point here for this bone right on where the handle is going to be, because I think that's probably the best thing for it. Alright, so now palm.r, I've got the parenting all set up. This looks good. Let's save. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my pose mode. And I can see inverse kinematics is here, but I actually didn't set up inverse kinematics on this foot. That's kind of weird. So just do that. Chain length to 3. And now I should be able to kind of play with it and just make sure that that foot does do what I want it to do. And I can rotate it with just RX. That looks pretty good. Let's make sure the hand does what I want it to do. Yes, and the fingers are coming with it. And so does the gun. And we've got the thumb and everything like that. Okay, I do believe we are ready to go. So I'm going to select all. I'm going to clear any transformations that I've made while testing. And now let's go and try this parenting thing again. So I'm going to click on the body, then I'm going to shift click on the armature, but I've got to be in object mode. I keep forgetting that. So let's try this again. So I'm going to right click on the body. Oh, the body's not selectable. Right click on the body, then shift right click on the armature, Control P. I'm going to set parent with automatic weights. So now let's take a look at what happens. If I right click on the armature and I go to pose mode, I should be able to move my character, and look at that, the hands come with it. Now the gun did not, and the reason why the gun did not is because I haven't parented the gun to the armature yet. So I'm going to do that, and I'll do that in just a minute. But first I just wanted to kind of test that a little bit. It's always just kind of fun to see what's going on with your character and kind of how it's going to work and how it's going to bend. You don't need to do anything really extreme. Obviously when he does this, it's not going to look very good, but the character's never going to do that, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now that all looks really good. Let's take a look at this hand. Kind of bend this. Now, alright, so we have some problems here on the neck. Well, we're going to take care of that in a little bit, but everything generally is looking pretty good. Rotate X, and look at that, his mouth even comes slightly open as he's, yep, oh look at the teeth, it's so funny. Honestly, a lot of times I just need to get rid of that. We'll get rid of the teeth because they're just a pain in the butt, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so now this looks pretty good. Let's talk about weight painting. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to clear my poses, and let's take the gun, let's select it, let's go back to object mode, click on that, go back to object mode on the armature, click on the gun, shift right click, nope, shift right click, nope, shift right click on the armature, not the character. Right click on that, shift right click on the armature. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to hit Control P. I'm going to set parent with automatic weights. And now the gun disappears in the outliner underneath the armature. There it is. Looks good. If I click on the armature again and I go back to pose mode, now when I move this hand just to test it really quickly, the gun should come with it. Yes, and it looks really good. Rotate Y, let's just kind of see what happens. Okay, so now notice that the gun is bending a little bit. This is what's going to happen to a lot of you when you do stuff like this, and this has to do with the automatic weighting. So what we're going to do, and that's weighting, W-E-I-G-H-T, is we're going to go into weight paint mode. So in weight paint mode, we right click and select the body itself, and then we'll do the gun in a second. Actually, let's do the gun because it's the easiest one. So we'll select the gun. And then under object mode, now we can go up to weight paint. And weight paint all of a sudden changes the colors. And you can kind of see how the gun turns into a blue color. Now, one of the things that I also like to do when I do this is I will go to the, I'll select the armature for a second, and I'm going to change the way the armature looks, and I'm going to go, it's here, under the little dude symbol here, and I'm going to go to stick. And now instead of the big octahedral shapes, I've got just the sticks. So now let's click back on our on the gun, and you can see that when I select different bones, okay, right click on the bone, the gun itself kind of changes colors, and you can see how this is a little green. I don't want the gun to be influenced by the forearm. I only want the gun to be influenced by the main bone that I have going down the middle of it. But it makes sense that it thought that it should be influenced by this bone because that's where the stock of the gun is. So over here I've got a whole new set of tools, and you can see weight, radius, and strength. Okay, the strength is the strength of what you're painting. The weight is the weight that you're painting. So if I keep it on full and I paint this, you'll see it starts to turn red and actually starts to bend even more. What I want it to do is I want to make it less. So I'm going to go weight, and I'm actually going to paint it less. And in doing that, what ends up happening, as you can see, is it reduces the influence of that bone on that object. So now we've got a real simple way of kind of taking our weapon here and saying, no, you're not going to have any influence. That bone, that forearm bone, is not going to have any influence on that portion of our object. So now if I right click on the bone that I made for the gun, you can see how it's red but not everywhere. So what I want to do now is I actually want to take this and I actually want to make it red. Now the weight paint mode paints by vertices, so you really have to get to the edges of the object. If you're trying to paint in the middle, it doesn't work. I'm not sure why my computer is getting kind of slow and piggish right now. I noticed it was doing that to me when I was testing this even before I was recording. It was whenever I worked on the gun, it got really slow, and I'm not quite sure why. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the influence of that bone that I made for the gun in the armature. I'm going to set that at full 100% for everything so that it's always the fullest influence. Go through here and just paint all that, and you can see how that's all going to kind of show up here in bright red. And the bright red means that I've got the most most amount of influence that I can. And it may help you to turn off the body so that you can kind of see what's going on, so that you can get every little piece of it. So we're almost there. That looks pretty good. And you know, there's some orange spots there. That's okay. There's green inside the trigger guard. Make sure you check inside areas like the trigger guard or other places that you might not look at right away. A little orange is not a big deal, especially since we're going to turn that off for all the other bones. But you definitely wouldn't want any green or blue in this case. So now I'm just going to go through. I'm literally going to go through all of these and just make sure that they don't have any influence. So that does. So I'm going to take the weight down to 0, and I'm going to go in here and paint that out. So now that bone has no influence on the handle of the gun whatsoever. And again, it makes sense that the that it would think that, but we don't want that at all. Well, it looks like that's got a little light blue on the stock there. We want to kind of get rid of that too. So that's the hardest thing sometimes, is seeing the light blue that's there, and kind of checking that out. So let's go here, fingers, yeah, so we don't want that. And it is very frustrating to do the weapon. The weapon is probably one of the hardest parts. And you know, you would just keep going. So I'm going to just keep going. I'm going to click on every bone in each finger, the thumb, the forefinger, each bone. So you're going to have to do all three, because if you look here as I go, see, there's a little influence there on this side here. If you left this be, then when you bent the fingers around the handle would actually start to warp, and so that obviously we don't want. So I click on that bone, and you can see now the trigger has a bunch of influence based on it. So you got to get rid of all of that. And once you do, then everything will be ready to go. So you're just going to have to click on every single one. And like I said, watch out for the light blues. That's the hardest. The light blues and the light greens sometimes are really hard to see. So anyway, I'm going to say that I'm done here for now. I'm not going to worry about the rest of it. Although I probably should. I'm not going to. Oh boy, yeah, see there, like, so as soon as I wrapped the middle finger around the handle of the gun, it would totally distort the magazine area here and make that look completely different. So it's really important to do the weight painting, especially on the weapon. And I think it's a little bit more important too when the weapon is a separate object, as it will be for most of you. That's when the whole thing can really go bad. Okay, now, and you can test it too by literally right-clicking on a bone, and then you can hit like rotate X, and you can kind of play with it and see how things will work. All right, so now let's take a look at the body really quickly, and I'll give you a couple, show you a couple places where obviously this isn't going to be working. So now I'm going to click on the body, and I'm going to go to weight paint mode, and now it's basically the same thing. And so I'm going to take where we were having some problems here when I was doing my testing, was right here on the shoulder. So now if I click on that, immediately I see that this has got a lot of influence over here. We probably don't want that at all. So I'm going to get rid of the influences that I see on the chest there for that bone. And then I right click here. That looks pretty good, but you see how that's a little heavy with the red there? We probably don't want that. We probably want a light blue. So this is where I want to start trying to match the colors. So I'm going to take the weight up to like 0.27 or so. And oh, look at that. See, and I try to match that blue greeny color there, so that things are going to work a little bit better than they were before. And go a little lighter. And the other thing that you can do is you can put the strength of this down, so it ends up looking like almost like Photoshop with opacity turned down. You can kind of like click, 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 and every time you do, it's a little less powerful or a little bit more powerful, and so on and so forth. So it's looking pretty good. I don't want it to influence anything all the way over there. I'm not quite sure why it is. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to kind of go here like this and just, you know, slowly do this. Now, you can easily get yourself way in over your head where all of a sudden things don't work anymore. Depending upon how far you've gone, if you're a little bit smarter about when you save, you can just revert. If, however, you've saved and realize that you need to go back beyond what you've done, the best thing to do is to clear the parent and then reparent it with automatic weights and start all over again. And that really stinks, but it is really sometimes the best thing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate Z. I'm going to bring this forward, and so now we see that one of these vertices has some pretty heavy-duty influence from the upper arm. Well, we don't want that, so I'm going to take my weight all the way down, take my strength all the way back up, take the radius up so that I hit the whole thing, and bam, 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 bam. And just make sure that any vertice that's under there has no influence whatsoever for the upper arm there. And then I can do, let's take the radius down, I can do a similar thing over here. I really don't want that to be influenced by the upper arm. Rotate Z and bring that forward and just kind of see how things go. That's looking pretty darn good, actually. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to go and you're going to click on every bone, and you're going to bend it a little bit, and you're going to kind of see what your influences are. Now here I'm getting some weird tearing that's happening. And so what I think I need to do is actually add some more influence here for the forearm so that the skin doesn't pull away from it when the wrist is bent. Now the wrist would probably never be bent that much, but at least it showed me something that I needed to know. So here I'm going to take the weight all the way up, and I'm going to take my strength down a little bit, and I'm just going to slowly start clicking until I get something that I might like to have. Now, if it goes all the way, and then all of a sudden won't go any further, the answer to that is I need to reduce the amount of influence that the palm bone has on these edges. Now, the other thing that I have to be careful of is up here. I grabbed some by accident, so I need to take the weight down, strength up, and make sure that none of that, excuse me, none of that is influenced by the forearm bone. And you may have to right-click and rotate things away. Yeah, so now if I take a look at this, the palm bone doesn't really influence much at all. But here we don't want it to influence much at all right here on the edge of the wrist. We want that to go back under the sleeve. So I'm just going to keep my strength somewhere in the middle, my weight down to 0, and I can start to paint that back in. And then again, I have to be very careful that I don't grab too much of other pieces. Now, sometimes you're going to, and right now, part of that is because of the extreme angle that the wrist is at. So let's just rotate Z, RZ, bring that back a little bit, okay? And now I can kind of lessen the influence there over certain things. It's really twisting here, and that does happen a little bit, and that's because the hand is twisted. So rotate Y, whoops, the other way. Nope, 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 this way. And you can see how it starts to untwist when it's like this. And that's a good thing to keep in mind when we pose our character, which will be part of our next demo, is that once you have to do that, you need to rotate the forearm before you only rotate the wrist, and so on and so forth, or else you'll see the mesh actually starting to twist. But this is actually looking really, really, really good. And you literally have to go through every bone, and then so like here, that's not so hot. I don't want the neck controlled by the chest bone much at all, if at all. So I can take that out and rotate X and kind of see how that's gonna make things bend. I mean, that is like the main bone there. So then here, look at this. It missed a whole big chunk here. So here I'm gonna want to take the weight up. And I'm going to want to click in there and kind of get that to be a little bit more powerful for the neck as we go around here. So you have to fine tune it a little bit some places. And once you start getting that, rotate X, RX, and I can kind of see how it's going to look, and you can kind of see, oh, that's not so good. So then I'll go and I'll take the weight all the way down, and I'll start painting the shirt back together here to kind of get the influence back to the way I want. Anyway, so let's keep going. Oh, we definitely don't want that. So I mean, it's really important to kind of keep going around and start playing with this to make sure that everything looks okay. Now let's take care of the teeth, because they're scaring me. Okay, so here's how we have to kind of take care of the teeth. And this is really, really difficult. But again, we're going to use some of the same methods we did to take care of some of those other meshes that were inside our object. So first things first, I'm going to get out of weight paint mode, and I'm going to go into edit mode for my object. And when I do that, the poses disappear, which actually is a little bit upsetting, because it would have been really nice if the poses had stayed where they were, because then I could have selected the teeth a little easier. For our purposes, we don't need the teeth. Now, you could try weight painting the teeth in. In my experience, it doesn't work very well, weight painting that mesh. And unfortunately enough, it comes in as part of the body from you, so it's not like I can separate it into a separate mesh, or at least not very easily. There's all sorts of problems. So we're going to go and select it. It's not an easy process though. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to vertices select mode, and I'm going to, whoops, I don't know what I just did, and we're going to deselect. And then I'm going to take a look at it from the complete side view. Okay. And I'm going to take my circle selector, and I'm going to just start, and I'm going to highlight everything that's in this general area. Now, the part that makes this more difficult than those little goobers that were in the legs and stuff is that part of this is the lips, and we don't want the lips to be like open too much, because if we do, then we're going to have other problems. But first I'm going to get rid of everything that I selected that was on the surface. So I'm going to middle click here and go over here, circle select, middle click, and now I've got everything that was on the surface deselected, and I can even get a couple of these. And I think there was another one over here. There was a couple over here. Middle click. Okay. So now we've kind of got a good setup here. We can kind of go in here and take a look. Oh, we missed one. So now what we have to do is we have to use our ability to see the lips through the wireframe really carefully, because it's very difficult to understand what's going on here with the wireframe, because all the meshes are kind of on top of each other. I really wish there was vertice groups or something, but there aren't. So what I'm going to do, and this is where you just kind of start deleting things, and hopefully you don't wreck stuff too much. So I'm going to take a look at the lips here, and I'm going to take the circle selector, and I'm going to middle click and get rid of some of the selection that I did right there. Now I may have gotten rid of some of the teeth, but I don't think so. I think most of that was only the lips. And same thing here. Circle select, middle click, and kind of get rid of some of that. And if I did get some of the teeth, which I did right there, that's okay. We're going to deal with that in a little bit. Just using the edge. I want to keep the inside of the lips as much as possible, because we're going to use those to close off the inside of the mouth. So circle select, do. Okay, that's pretty darn good. Yeah. Okay. So this is pretty good. Now I'm going to take this. I'm going to go X and delete those vertices. Now we've got a mess inside here, but hopefully it'll all work out. Not hopefully, it will. Of course it's going to work out. We've got some teeth left over. We've got all sorts of stuff left over. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at it right from the front here. I'm going to use my circle selector, and I'm just going to grab those vertices there and those vertices there. Now I'm going to zoom in. I definitely don't want those selected. Get out of mesh mode, or wireframe mode. Sorry, my bad. Make sure that I don't have anything on the surface selected. Go back to wireframe mode. Oop, we got a whole bunch of stuff on the back of the head. That's really important to look for. Take care of that. And now I can zoom in and see what I've got selected. That's a pretty good start. X, delete my vertices. And I'm doing pretty well here. Now the hard part is getting the teeth that were really, really close to the lips, and having those be selected and not the lips. And it's definitely hard to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish that up. I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to finish that up, and then I'll come back to you in just a second, and we'll see. Well, I can't pause. All right, so let's just do this. Yeah, I didn't realize that I couldn't pause with this software. Well, that stinks. So anyway, once you do that, what you need to do is, hopefully you can get an edge down along the lips, and you can create a new mouth cavity. That's what I would do by extruding. There's a lot of cleanup to do in here, but we can do it pretty easily, so just take care of that. Here I'm just going to start deleting and selecting individual vertices and just doing nasty, yucky, horrible, whoops, really difficult cleanup. Anyway, I think you get the idea of what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get rid of any of these vertices that I know don't mean anything. Now, one of the things that you can use to really help yourself out so that you know that you're actually getting stuff is when you complete a face, you'll see how it kind of gets highlighted in yellow there. That's really important. Watch what gets highlighted so that you know that you're selecting things that are not attached to the mouth, that aren't going to be important stuff for us to do later on. Because that is really important, and the way that Blender highlights faces like that is really awesome because it allows us the ability to make sure that we're not deleting things that are super uber important. So anyway, I think you get the idea. So in review, okay, 1, you need to do a boolean on all the objects. All the body objects to make them 1. Don't do a boolean with your weapon. Make sure the weapon stays separate. Make sure you've got a bone for the weapon. If you have a bow and arrow, I'd actually like to work with you on the bones before you actually do this process, so don't go there yet. Yeah, so once you parent, or once you do the boolean, you can save as a new file, delete everything else, then you parent the body to the armature with automatic weights. Once you do that, then you can parent the weapon to the armature as well. After you've done those two things, then go in, right click, you have to select the object itself and select weight paint. Not the armature, but the object itself. And then once you go to weight paint mode, you can go ahead and select a bone. So weight paint, see, you can select the bone and you can start to modify the way the bone influences the mesh, which is super cool. One last little tip. Before you do that, you need to select the armature and make sure the armature is set to pose mode. If the armature is not set to pose mode, guess what? Weight painting will not work. And as you can see, I've got a lot of work to do in the neck area. It's very complicated and very frustrating, and I've got, oh look, you got some mesh. So these are parts of the teeth and stuff that I haven't deleted yet that are flying out of there. So anyway, I've got some work to do. Weight painting is frustrating, but also realize this, be realistic about it. Okay, if I take his head and I do this with it, it's not gonna look normal. Well, guess what? It's not going to do that. I'm never going to make the head do that in the game. So don't go too extreme. You might have the head go up a little bit like that. Don't, if things look good there, then you don't need to alter the weight painting, even if they don't look so good, just a few more degrees back. That's never going to affect us, at least in this situation. If we were doing a full animated movie where we had to worry about stuff, then yeah, it might be a big deal. The other thing you don't need to worry about is this overlapping here along the arms. That's normal, especially in video games. You guys have seen it. It happens all the time. So depending upon how precise your character needs to be, these overlapping issues, they're gonna be there, and we don't really need to worry about them too much. So other than that, it's really just about making sure that everything works. And if I, get here in the pose mode and I take these two and rotate Z, you can see as I rotate, the hips will twist. I mean, you have so much power to do so many really cool things with a good armature. It's really, really, really cool. For us, what we want to do is get this all set up, and then I'm going to show you how we pose our character in the pose that they're going to be in as we start the game, and that's going to be the most important thing. So I do believe that's everything for now. Hopefully this will help you out, get started, and get the weight paints on there. And like I said, at very worst, sometimes you just gotta start all over again. Let me show you how to do that really quickly. If I need to start all over again, make sure you're in object mode for both objects. You shift and right click back on the parent object and the so the body and the armature, and you hit Alt P, and Alt P gives you a menu that's clear parent, and you click that, and now you notice that the body jumped away from the armature, and now the gun is the only thing that is still part of the armature. Okay, instead I'm going to undo that and keep him so I can continue my demos with you guys for the next step. But this makes sense, I hope, for everybody. I hope it's been useful. I know it's been a long one, well, yeah. basically, I think this is a good start for basic character building for your video games.